There was a man named Daniel. Daniel was the kind of person everyone liked. If a friend needed help, he showed up. If a coworker needed coverage, he said, "No problem." Daniel knew when people were taking more than they gave. But every time he wanted to say no, he froze. He didn't want to seem selfish, disappoint people, or be seen as difficult, so he kept saying yes. But one day, he realized something painful. Some people didn't call because they loved him. They called because he was useful. Being nice is not always kindness. Sometimes it is fear wearing a beautiful mask. Daniel said yes, not because he always wanted to help, but because saying no made him anxious. He smiled when he was angry. He said, "It's fine," when it was not fine. Real kindness has a choice. Real kindness says, "I can say no, but I choose to help." People-pleasing says, "I don't know how to say no, so I call it kindness." One comes from freedom. The other comes from fear. Daniel had one friend named Mark. Mark was charming, funny, and easy to like. But every time Mark called, there was a problem. He needed help with a project, support late at night, or Daniel to cancel his plans. At first, Daniel told himself, that's what friends do. But slowly, he noticed something. When Daniel needed help, Mark was busy. When Daniel wanted to talk, Mark disappeared. When Daniel said he was tired, Mark changed the subject. The friendship only worked when Daniel was giving. The moment Daniel needed something back, the relationship became quiet. That was when Daniel understood. Some people do not love you. They love your availability. They love that you answer quickly and don't ask for much. They may not love the real you. They love the useful you. When you stop being useful in the old way, some relationships start falling apart. Sometimes it means the relationship was only standing on your self-abandonment. One night, Mark called again. He needed urgent help. Daniel was exhausted. His mouth almost said the old words. "Sure, no problem." But something inside him stopped. And he said, "I'm sorry. I can't help tonight." There was silence. Then Mark said, "Wow, really? I thought I could count on you." Immediately, guilt came up. Maybe I'm selfish. Maybe I'm a bad friend. Maybe I should just help this one time. This is how guilt works. Your guilt is the leash. A manipulative person does not need to control your whole life. They only need to control your guilt. If they can make you feel guilty for saying no, you will say yes. If they can make you feel guilty for resting, you will overwork. Daniel almost apologized, but then he noticed something. Mark was not asking if Daniel was okay. Mark was only upset because Daniel was no longer available. And in that moment, Daniel understood. Some people are not hurt because you harmed them. They are hurt because you stopped playing the role they assigned to you. After that night, Mark became cold. He stopped inviting Daniel to things. He made small comments. He said, "Daniel has changed." At first, Daniel felt terrible because this was his biggest fear. He had become the bad guy. But then he asked himself, was I really loved or was I just convenient? That question changed everything. If a friendship only works when you have no boundaries, it is not friendship. It is access. If a relationship only feels peaceful when you betray yourself, it is not peace. It is control. If someone only calls you good when you are easy to use, their definition of good is not your responsibility. If you never show your limits, people will assume you have none. People learn how to treat you based on what you repeatedly allow. If you always answer, they assume you are always available. If you always forgive, they assume they can repeat the behavior. This is how a good person becomes invisible. Not because nobody sees you, but because everyone sees what you provide and nobody sees what it costs you. Carl Jung talked about the shadow. The shadow is the part of yourself you learn to hide. For people pleasers, the shadow is often anger, not violent anger. Boundary anger. The anger that says, that was not okay. I don't want this. I am not available for this anymore. Because you were trained to be nice, you may feel ashamed of that anger. But sometimes, your anger is not your enemy. It is the part of you that still remembers your worth. It is the alarm system that goes off when your boundary has been crossed. If you silence that alarm for too long, you do not become peaceful. You become resentful. So Daniel stopped chasing Mark's approval. He stopped explaining himself. When Mark acted cold, Daniel did not beg. When Mark said, "You've changed," Daniel simply thought, "Yes, I have." That was the beginning of his freedom. At first, it felt lonely. But then, Daniel started sleeping better. He had more energy. He stopped checking his phone with anxiety. For the first time in years, his life felt like it belonged to him. Here is the hardest truth. If you cannot tolerate being disliked, you are not free. A lot of people say they want freedom, but they still want everyone to approve of them. That is impossible. Freedom always has a social cost. When you say no, someone may be disappointed. When you set a boundary, someone may misunderstand you. When you stop saving everyone, someone may call you selfish. So the question is not, how do I make sure nobody dislikes me? The real question is, am I willing to be disliked by the wrong people so I can stop betraying myself? If you need everyone to see you as good, anyone can control you by threatening your image. They only need one sentence. "I thought you were better than this." And suddenly, you are explaining, apologizing, and trying to prove your heart again. But you do not need to prove your goodness to people who use your goodness against you. So what does it mean to be the bad guy? It means you stop making your boundaries negotiable just because someone is unhappy. It means you stop giving unlimited access to people who give you minimum respect. It means you stop confusing being needed with being loved. It means you can say, "No, I can't do that," without writing a long emotional essay afterward. That is not cruelty. That is adulthood. That is kindness with a spine. Daniel did not become heartless. He still helped people, but he helped because he chose to, not because he was afraid of guilt. Some people left his life, but the people who stayed respected him more. You do not become free by becoming a worse person. You become free by becoming a whole person. A whole person can be kind and firm and love without disappearing. The goal is not to become cruel. The goal is to stop being controlled by the fear of being seen as cruel. Because some people will only call you good when you are easy to use. So when you stop being easy to use, they may call you bad. Let them. Be the bad guy in the story of people who needed you weak. Be the bad guy in the story of people who preferred you silent. Be the bad guy in the story of people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Because sometimes, the moment they stop calling you good is the moment you finally start belonging to yourself.